A black elderly man finds a lost wallet on a rainy street. So he does what he's always done his whole life, the right thing. He tracks down the owner to return it, never imagining who's waiting on the other side of that door. A tattooed biker with a stare that could freeze fire, fresh out of prison. And once a feared Hell's Angel. What begins as a simple act of honesty spirals into something no one in town could have expected. Because this old man isn't just giving back a wallet, he's about to hand someone a second chance at life. But when dark figures from the biker's past come roaring back, kindness turns dangerous, and faith is tested in ways neither of them are ready for. Can one small act of goodness melt the walls of hate, fear, and regret? Or will doing what's right cost him everything? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Rain drummed against the cracked sidewalk as James Pops Carter tugged his coat tighter around his thin shoulders. The Alabama sky hung low and gray, and his worn boots splashed through shallow puddles that mirrored the flickering lights of the old gas station. He had just finished his volunteer shift at the soup kitchen, his favorite part of the day. Helping people gave him something to wake up for, even when the mornings felt heavy without Mary beside him. As he stepped off the curb, something brown and crumpled caught his eye near the gutter. He bent down slowly, his knees creaking. It was a leather wallet, soaked from the rain but still sturdy. Pops picked it up and wiped the surface with his sleeve. Inside, there were 8 crisp $100 bills, a folded picture of a young girl in a denim jacket, and a worn driver's license. The photo struck him. The little girl couldn't have been more than 10. She was smiling, missing a front tooth, with big brown eyes that seemed full of light. Pops turned the license over and read the name out loud. Randy Matheson. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. Then it hit him. Folks in town had whispered about a man by that name, a biker who'd been part of a gang, a man who'd spent years behind bars. Pops looked at the cash again. His roof leaked when it rained, and the furnace barely worked. $800 could make a lot of problems disappear. But he shook his head firmly. Mary wouldn't want that, he murmured to himself. He tucked the wallet into his coat pocket and kept walking, rain streaming down his face. When he reached his little one-room home at the edge of town, he placed the wallet on the kitchen table beside his Bible. The old clock ticked softly in the quiet room. He picked up the landline and dialed his neighbor, Miss Lila Thompson. "Evening, Lila," he said. "You ever heard of a man named Randy Matheson?" Lila's voice came sharp through the receiver. "Lord, James, you stay away from that name. That man's trouble. Word is he's one of them Hell's Angels. Moved back here after prison. You don't need that mess in your life." Pops smiled faintly. "I just found something that belongs to him. I can't keep it." "Then mail it. Don't you go knocking on no biker's door." He chuckled softly. "Ain't how my mama raised me. I'll do it right." When he hung up, he stared at Mary's framed photo on the wall, a picture from their 40th anniversary. Her gentle smile still warmed the room. "You'd tell me to take it back, wouldn't you, darling?" he said softly. "Do right, even when nobody's watching." That night, Pops prayed for protection, then fell asleep with the sound of the rain pattering like footsteps on the roof. The next morning, the sky had cleared. Pops dressed neatly, wearing his best flannel shirt and his old army jacket. He slipped the wallet into his inner pocket, grabbed his cane, and caught the early bus heading towards the old trailer park outside town. The ride was quiet, except for the hum of the tires on wet asphalt. Pops watched the scenery blur past: fields, half-empty gas stations, and roadside churches. He prayed silently the whole way. When he stepped off the bus, a chill wind brushed his face. The trailer park looked forgotten. Muddy paths, rusted bikes, and old mailboxes leaning sideways. The sign out front read, "Sunny Acres," but there wasn't a bit of sunshine in sight. Pops walked slowly, scanning the faded numbers on each trailer door until he found Lot 9. A pit bull barked from behind a fence. Pops steadied his breath and knocked on the metal door. Inside, footsteps thudded closer. The door swung open, and there stood a tall, rough-looking man with a scar running from his eyebrow to his cheek. His eyes were cold, his arms covered in tattoos. "What do you want, old man?" the biker growled. Pops didn't flinch. He pulled the wallet from his coat and held it out. "You dropped this yesterday. Found it by the gas station." The man snatched it from his hand, flipping it open quickly. He counted the bills, his brow furrowing. Then he looked up, suspicious. "You didn't take nothin'?" Pops met his eyes steadily. "Didn't belong to me." A long silence hung in the doorway. Then the man muttered, "Huh," as if he didn't know what to do with decency anymore. "Well, thanks," he said gruffly. He started to close the door, but paused halfway. "You want some coffee or something?" Pops hesitated. Then he smiled. "Wouldn't say no." Inside, the trailer smelled of oil and cigarette smoke. The walls were covered with biker posters and old photos. The man poured black coffee into 2 chipped mugs. They sat at the tiny table, neither speaking for a long moment. "You got a name?" the biker finally asked. "Pops," he said with a chuckle. "Well, James Carter, but everybody calls me Pops." "Randy," the man said, nodding. "Guess you already knew that." They sat quietly, the sound of the coffee maker dripping filling the silence. Then Randy said, "Why'd you bring it back? You could have kept the cash. Nobody would have known." Pops shrugged. "I would have known. That's enough." Randy looked at him for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. For the first time, his voice softened. "You don't meet many like you anymore." Pops smiled faintly. "Maybe you've just been looking in the wrong places." When Pops stood to leave, Randy followed him to the door. "Thanks again," he said, almost awkwardly. "Not many folks would have done that." Pops tipped his hat. "You take care of yourself, son." As Pops walked away down the muddy road, Randy stood in the doorway watching him, the wallet still in his hands. For the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't name. Something small and bright, like hope trying to find its way through the cracks. And as Pops boarded the bus home, he whispered a quiet prayer. "Lord, maybe that man needed more than a wallet back." The bus dropped Pops near his street just after noon. The rain had blown off, but the world still felt wet and new. Water beaded on the magnolia leaves. Puddles shone like tiny mirrors in the cracked road. Pops walked slow, steadying himself with his cane, the empty space beside him a reminder that Mary used to hold his elbow on slippery days. He smiled at the memory, then let it fade gentle, like a song at the end of a record. Inside his small house, he hung his jacket and set his cane by the door. The room smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner. He made himself a sandwich and ate at the little table. The wallet was gone now, back with its owner, but the picture of the smiling little girl stayed in Pop's mind. He wondered who she had grown to be. He wondered what kind of father the biker had been. After lunch, Pops swept the kitchen. It was a habit from years of cleaning other people's floors. He swept when he thought. He swept when he prayed. As the broom moved, his thoughts kept circling the same place, a scarred face, hard eyes, and the quiet change he had seen when the man realized not $1 was missing. He picked up the phone. It rang only once. "James?" Miss Lila asked, voice sharp as a tack. "Tell me you mailed whatever it was." I gave it to him, Lila, Pops said, brushing crumbs from the table. Hand to hand. A tiny gasp crackled over the line. Lord have mercy, you did not. I did. We had coffee. He said thank you. You had coffee with a biker who just got out of prison? She said, each word underlined by worry. James Carter. What if he followed you home? If he did, he'll find a broom and a Bible, Pops said, half teasing, half serious. I ain't picking a fight with no one, but I won't be ruled by fear, not after all the years we've lived through. Some fears keep you breathing, she shot back. But then her tone softened. You be careful. I'll put a pot roast on tomorrow. You come by at 5 for a plate. Yes, ma'am, he said, smiling. They said goodbye. Afternoon slanted toward evening. Pops sat in his rocker by the window and read from Psalms. The words steadied him. The house creaked like an old ship, peaceful and sure. He dozed a little, woke to the sound of a car outside, and looked up. A dented truck idled by the curb. The engine clicked as it cooled. The driver climbed out and shut the door with care, as if he didn't want to wake the street. It was the biker, Randy, with a paper coffee cup in one hand and a small brown bag in the other. He stood at the bottom of the walkway like a kid outside a principal's office. Pops pushed up from his chair, grabbed his cane, and opened the door. Afternoon. Hey, Randy said. His voice was rough like gravel, but not unfriendly. He lifted the bag. I, brought you something. Coffee and a donut. Figured I owed you. You didn't know me, Pops said, stepping aside. But I won't say no. Come on in. Randy hesitated, then crossed the threshold. His eyes flicked over the neat room. Crocheted blanket on the couch, a shelf of church cookbooks, Mary's photo on the wall. He moved like a big man trying to take up less space. They sat at the table. Pops poured the coffee into his own mug and split the donut on a napkin. Sugar? Nah, Randy said. I like it bitter. Pops raised his mug. To honest coffee, then. Randy huffed a small laugh and took a sip. For a minute, neither spoke. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked, then quieted. A box fan hummed in the corner. I didn't expect you to come by, Pops said finally. I didn't expect you to bring my wallet, Randy answered. He stared at the donut half, as if it might bite him first. Folks don't do that. Not for me. Maybe they should, Pops said. Randy shrugged. His shoulders looked heavy, like 2 sacks of wet sand. Look, I ain't good at this. Saying thanks. You did me right. Kinda shook me. Being treated fair can surprise a man who hasn't seen it in a while, Pops said. He didn't push. He let the quiet sit like an open chair. Randy reached inside his jacket and pulled out the photo, the same one Pops had seen. He held it up, not quite showing it, not quite hiding it. You saw her. I did, Pops said softly. She was 10 in this picture, Randy said. He slid it across the table. Her name's Maggie. She's 30 now. 30. He said it like he had tripped over a step he hadn't seen. I missed a lot. Pops studied the small face, the gap-toothed grin, the bright eyes. She looks brave. She had to be, he said. Her mama left when she was little. I didn't help none. I was mean, drunk, angry at the whole world and myself most of all. I joined up, with men who liked to hurt the things I hated. You run long enough, you stop looking back. He rubbed his jaw. The scar along his eyebrow twitched. Prison makes you stare at a wall until your past stares back. Some nights I still hear chains that ain't there. Pops let the words settle. He understood long regret. It made a person's hands shake on calm mornings. You think of calling her? Pops asked, gentle as a hand on a shoulder. Randy barked a broken laugh. Think? Every day. Then I choke. He shrugged again, but this time it was smaller, She deserves peace. So do you, Pops said. Peace comes from truth, even bad truth. He nudged the photo back toward Randy. Maybe tonight you write the first line. Tomorrow you write the second. Doesn't have to be pretty, just honest. Randy turned the picture face down, as if the little girl could see him, and he needed a moment to be brave. He looked around the room again. His eyes landed on Mary's picture. Your lady? My Mary, Pop said, smiling at the frame. 42 years. She went on home a while back. Still keeps me in line. Looks kind, Randy said, like she'd smack a man with a wooden spoon and bake him a pie right after. Pops laughed. You just met her. They ate the donut in halves, sipping coffee. The small act felt like a ceremony. When they finished, Randy stood and slid the photo into his jacket again. I got a toolbox sitting in my truck, he said, voice gruff with an idea. You got a porch step that's loose. I can fix it. Pay back what you did, a little. Neighbor boy keeps telling me he'll get to it, Pops said, amused. Hasn't yet. I'll take you up on that. They moved outside. Evening light lay soft across the street. Randy knelt by the step, tested the boards, and set to work. His hands were sure and quick, the rhythm of the screwdriver steady. Pops held the flashlight as the sun dipped lower. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Nails sank, wood snugged into place, and something in the air felt better too. When he finished, Randy wiped his hands on a rag. Won't wobble now. Pops pressed down with his boot. Rock solid. You're good at fixing, he said. Metal and wood are easy, Randy said. He wiped his palms again. People are not. People don't need fixing as much as they need someone who won't give up on them, Pops said. But I've seen a carburetor humble a man too. That got a real laugh out of Randy, quick and bright. You ever work on bikes? No, sir. I worked on floors. But I admire anyone who can make broken things run smooth. Randy glanced toward his truck, toward the road, toward the part of town where the trailer park sat like a tired secret. He cleared his throat. I'll try to write that line tonight. Might just say, I'm sorry I wasn't your dad when you needed one. That's a good first line, Pop said. Better than most prayers. Randy looked down, like he wasn't used to praise landing soft. He started for his truck, then turned back. Look, I don't sleep much. If I bring chicken by tomorrow evening, 7 sharp, you think you'd help me with the next sentence? 7 sharp, Pop said, holding out his hand. Randy gripped it. His palm was rough and warm. All right then. He drove away slow, as if sudden moves might scare the new thing he had found. The truck's taillights glowed red at the end of the street, then turned the corner and vanished. Pops stood on the porch, testing the solid step again, feeling the little lift in his chest. He looked up at the first star and spoke in a voice only God and Mary knew. Thank you for sending him, even if you sent him with scars. He went inside, washed the coffee cups, and set one beside the other on the drying towel, like old friends resting. He wrote 7 p.m. chicken on a scrap of paper and stuck it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a sunflower. He said his prayers. He slid into bed, bones aching the way old bones do after a good day's work. In the trailer park, Randy sat at his tiny table with a pen and a blank piece of paper. He stared at the photo for a long time, then set it above the page like a compass. The first minutes were only breathing. Then the pen touched down, dragged slow, and made a line. I'm sorry I wasn't your dad when you needed one. He stopped, rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands, and kept writing. The words stumbled, but they came, and as they came, something inside him loosened, like a knot learning how to untie. Back on his street, Pops rolled to his side and smiled in the dark. The house hummed, The repaired step kept quiet watch, and a promise hung in the space between today and tomorrow. It would be kept at 7. The morning sun peeked through thin clouds, turning the wet streets to silver. Pops woke early, as always, made himself a cup of coffee, and read a few verses before heading out. The house smelled of lemon polish and peace. He checked his note on the fridge, 7 p.m. chicken, and smiled. The thought of company that evening made his small home feel less empty. By noon, word had spread faster than a summer storm. When Pops walked into the church hall for his volunteer shift, people stopped stirring soup to look at him. Miss Lila was the first to speak. "James Carter," she said, folding her arms. "Tell me it isn't true you had dinner with that biker." Pops kept his tone calm. "Wasn't dinner, was coffee and a donut." "Well, I heard different," said Deacon Turner, setting down a box of canned goods. "He's trouble. That man's got a record longer than the hymn book. You can't save everyone, James." Pops smiled kindly. "Didn't say I could, but I can sure try to be kind while the Lord does his work." Miss Lila sighed. "You've got a good heart, but, mercy, you test my nerves." They went back to work, though the whispers didn't stop. Pops stirred soup in silence, letting the rhythm of the spoon calm his thoughts. He wasn't angry. He understood fear. Fear made people small. But he'd lived long enough to know small hearts never changed big things. That evening, as the clock neared 7, Pops wiped his hands on a towel and looked around his tidy kitchen. He had fried chicken warming in the oven, biscuits wrapped in a towel, and sweet tea chilling in the fridge. A knock came right on time. Randy stood at the door, holding a small box of takeout from the diner. "Hope you don't mind," he said. "Brought coleslaw. Figured it's a crime to eat chicken without it." "Then you're preaching to the choir," Pops said, laughing as he let him in. They sat down together, steam rising from the plates. Randy ate slowly, his shoulders still tense, as if he wasn't used to being welcome anywhere. "Ain't had a meal this quiet since I was a kid," he said. "Quiet's good," Pops replied. "Means your heart's listening." After a while, Pops nodded toward the folded paper sticking out of Randy's jacket. "You write that second line yet?" Randy wiped his mouth with a napkin. "Yeah." Said, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know I remember your face." "It ain't poetry, but it's true." "Truth's better than poetry," Pops said. "Poetry don't heal nothin' if it's a lie." Randy stared at his plate. "You really think she'd read it?" Pops leaned back, folding his hands over his stomach. "Son, she's been waiting her whole life to read something like that." Randy didn't answer, but a flicker of hope softened his face. He took a deep breath and said, "You know, folks in town keep looking at me like I'm a wolf in church. Guess they told you the same." "They told me," Pops said, "but I don't take stock in talk. Folks been talking about me my whole life, too. First 'cause I was black, then 'cause I was poor. I got used to letting my actions do the speaking." Randy nodded slowly. "You got grit, old man." Pops chuckled. "I got grace. Grit's just grace that's lived a while." They ate until their plates were clean, and the kitchen smelled like warmth and fried flour. When they finished, Randy stood and helped wash the dishes without being asked. His large hands moved carefully, afraid to break the delicate plates. Outside, the evening settled in, golden light stretching across the road. Randy stepped onto the porch to leave, and Pops followed, resting against the rail. "You ever think about going to church again?" Pops asked gently. Randy froze halfway down the steps. "Church don't want me." "Church wants souls," Pops said. "Sometimes folks inside forget that, but God doesn't." Randy rubbed the back of his neck. "I'll think about it." Pops smiled. "That's all I ask." Randy climbed into his truck and started the engine, the rumble breaking the quiet. But before he drove off, he leaned out the window. "You ever need something fixed, I'm your guy." "Start with yourself," Pops said with a wink. Randy laughed. "Working on it." When the truck's taillights faded, Pops sat on the porch swing for a while, watching the stars blink on. The town was quiet except for crickets and the hum of a faraway radio. He felt Mary close then, like the warmth of a blanket pulled over his shoulders. But peace doesn't sit long in a small town. The next morning, Pops walked to the corner store for milk and bread. Outside, two men leaned against a truck, talking low. Their voices stopped when he passed. He caught one whisper, "That old fool's got no sense, doing business with trash like that." Pops pretended not to hear, but it stung. Inside, Miss Lila was by the counter, fussing with the newspaper rack. "James, folks are saying you've lost your mind," she said softly. He picked up a loaf of bread. "Maybe I have, but I'd rather lose my mind being kind than keep it being scared." She sighed. "You're gonna end up in trouble." "Maybe," Pops said, "but trouble's just opportunity in disguise." That afternoon, while fixing a loose board on the back fence, Pops heard a truck pull up. It was Randy again, but this time his expression was troubled. "Some guy's been watching my place," he said. "Brothers from my old chapter. Guess they don't like seeing me talking to church folks." Pops wiped sweat from his brow. "You tell the sheriff?" Randy shook his head. "Wouldn't do much good. I'll handle it." "You got someone to call if things get rough?" Randy looked away. "Just you, I guess." Pops gripped his shoulder. "You ain't alone no more. Remember that." Randy nodded, his jaw tight, but something in his eyes eased. "You're a strange man, Pops. Don't make sense why you care." Pops smiled faintly. "Doesn't need to make sense. Kindness don't use math." The two men shared a brief laugh before Randy headed back to his truck. When he was gone, Pops stood in the yard a long time, staring at the empty road. The wind rustled the trees, carrying a whisper that sounded almost like Mary's voice. "Be careful, James. That man's life's tied to yours now." That night, Pops knelt by his bed, the lamplight soft on the quilt Mary had sewn. "Lord," he prayed quietly, "if this man's meant for trouble, then let me be there to meet it first." He didn't know yet that trouble had already started rolling down the road. On two motorcycles, engines rumbling like thunder from the past. The next morning broke warm and bright, the kind of southern morning that made even cracked sidewalks look golden. Pops was up before sunrise, making cornbread for the soup kitchen. The air smelled of butter and coffee. As he wrapped the loaves in foil, he hummed one of Mary's favorite hymns. "His eye is on the sparrow." He buttoned his cleanest shirt, grabbed his worn hat, and started the walk to town. The day felt lighter somehow, though a whisper of unease stirred beneath his calm. The night before, Randy's talk about being watched had lingered like smoke he couldn't wave away. Still, Pops had learned long ago. Worry didn't stop storms. It only made you shiver early. When he reached the soup kitchen, the volunteers were already bustling. The scent of chili and cornbread filled the air. But the mood was different today. Tight smiles, quick glances. Miss Lila avoided his eyes as she handed him a ladle. "Morning," Pops said cheerfully. "Morning," she replied, keeping her voice low. "James, maybe you should take it easy today. There's talk again." He looked at her kindly. "There's always talk, Lila. Ain't no law says we got to listen." Deacon Turner stepped out from the pantry, folding his sleeves. "Folks don't like seeing you with that biker. Man like that could drag trouble right to our doorstep. Soup kitchen's supposed to be safe." Pops kept ladling soup, steady and slow. Safety don't mean much if we stop feeding souls that need it most. Turner frowned. You're too trusting. Maybe, Pop said with a smile. But it served me well. Trust lets the Lord do His work. Turner shook his head and walked off. Miss Lila sighed but gave him a small nod of respect. You sure do have a stubborn halo, James Carter. He grinned. Better a stubborn halo than a rusty heart. By noon, the line stretched out the door. Pops greeted each person with a kind word. Veterans, single mothers, quiet men down on their luck. He moved like a steady tide, unhurried and sure. As the crowd thinned, he looked up and froze. Randy was standing at the doorway, holding a box of tools. Hope I ain't late, Randy said, trying to sound casual. Miss Lila nearly dropped her ladle. Lord help us, Pops broke into a grin. Right on time, son. Stove's been acting up again. Randy set his box down and rolled up his sleeves. He knelt beside the old industrial stove, tools clinking as he worked. Sweat glistened on his tattooed arms, and the sound of metal tightening filled the air. For a moment, the kitchen went silent. Volunteers frozen, watching this unlikely pair. Then the stove roared to life with a hiss and a flame. Good as new, Randy said, standing. The crowd broke into applause. Pops clapped the loudest. Ain't nothing this man can't fix, he said proudly. Miss Lila tried to hide her smile. Well, I'll be. Maybe God really does work in mysterious ways. Been saying that all along, Pops replied. They worked side by side until the pots were clean and the counters shined. When it was time to close, Randy wiped his hands and said softly, Haven't felt this useful in years. You were always useful, Pops said. Just needed a reminder. As they stepped outside, the sun was dipping low. The street was quiet, but Pops noticed two men across the road leaning on motorcycles. Their leather vests gleamed, and one of them, tall, with a snake tattoo curling up his neck, was watching Randy closely. Randy's jaw tightened. They're from my old crew. They trouble? Pops asked calmly. Used to be family, Randy muttered. Now they're ghosts that don't like letting go. Pops studied them. Then maybe it's time you stop running from ghosts. Randy gave a humorless laugh. Easier said than done. They parted ways, Randy to his truck, Pops to his walk home, but both carried the same unease. That evening, Pops sat on his porch with a cup of tea, the crickets singing under the moonlight. He thought about the look in those bikers' eyes, mean, possessive, like wolves guarding what wasn't theirs. He prayed quietly. Lord, build a fence of angels around that boy. Halfway through his prayer, headlights swept across his yard. A truck rolled to a stop. Randy stepped out, holding a folded letter and looking more nervous than Pops had ever seen him. Evening, Pops said. You're early. I couldn't wait, Randy said, voice low. I finished the letter. Wanted to show you before I mailed it. He handed it over. Pops adjusted his glasses and read. Maggie, I don't know if you'll ever want to read this. I wasn't there when you needed a dad. I was angry, drunk, and wrong. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm trying to be the kind of man you deserved all along. If you ever want to see me again, I'll be waiting. No lies, no gangs, no hate. Just me. Pops felt a sting behind his eyes. That's a fine letter, son. Strong and humble. Mary would have said it came straight from your heart. Randy rubbed the back of his neck. You think she'd actually read it? I think she's been waiting her whole life for this. Randy nodded slowly. I'll mail it tomorrow. Good, Pops said. Then you sleep easy tonight. The hardest part's already done. As they talked, Pops noticed the same two bikers down the road again, leaning on their bikes, watching silently from the shadows. Randy saw them too. He swore under his breath. They don't quit, Want me to call the sheriff? Pops asked. Randy shook his head. They're just trying to scare me. Let 'em watch. I ain't going back. Pops placed a hand on his shoulder. Then stand tall. You ain't alone anymore. Randy looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Guess I'll head home. Don't worry, Pops. I can handle ghosts. Pops smiled faintly. Just remember, when you're done fighting 'em, come by for breakfast. I make good biscuits. Deal, Randy said, grinning as he turned to leave. The truck rumbled down the street, taillights glowing red against the night. Pops watched until they disappeared. He whispered, Lord, watch over him. He's still learning how to stand. Then he sat in the quiet, feeling both proud and uneasy. The wind carried the faint sound of motorcycles revving somewhere far off. It was a warning, soft and low, like thunder still beyond the hills. In that moment, Pops knew. Kindness was never free. It always asked you to be brave enough to keep believing in it, even when trouble started knocking. And as the crickets sang, he decided he'd be ready when it did. By sunrise, Pops was already in motion. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of magnolias and damp grass. He tied his shoes, grabbed his old hat, and stepped outside. Birds were chirping in the trees, and for the first time in a long while, the day felt full of quiet purpose. He made his way to the soup kitchen early. When he opened the door, the familiar creak echoed like a greeting. The air inside was cool and still. He filled the coffee pot, humming softly, letting the peaceful routine push away the memory of those motorcycles from the night before. But peace didn't last long. Around mid-morning, the back door banged open, and Randy strode in with a heavy metal toolbox in his hand. Morning, he said, his voice rough but lighter than usual. Morning to you, Pops replied. Didn't think I'd see you this early. Randy grinned faintly. Couldn't sleep. Figured I'd come help fix something. Pops chuckled. You'll find plenty that needs fixin' around here. Within an hour, Randy was under the kitchen counter, tightening pipes and replacing old fittings. Pops worked beside him, organizing donated food, keeping up a steady stream of small talk. By noon, other volunteers had arrived, Miss Lila among them. When she spotted Randy on his knees fixing a leaking pipe, she froze. What in the Lord's name? Pops raised a calming hand. He's helpin'. Randy looked up, giving her a polite nod. Just patchin' leaks, ma'am. Nothing dangerous. Miss Lila huffed, but didn't walk away. She watched him for a moment, then muttered, we'll see. The hours passed, and something beautiful began to happen. Randy worked steadily, quietly, not demanding attention, just fixing what was broken. The volunteers started relaxing. One young man even asked Randy how to replace a stove burner. Randy showed him with patience that surprised everyone. When lunch service started, Randy stayed to help ladle stew. His big hands moved carefully as he handed out bowls. Some of the guests looked wary at first. His tattoos still drew stares. But the moment he said, "God bless you," in that low, sincere voice, the tension softened. Miss Lila leaned close to Pops. "He ain't half bad," she whispered. "I've been telling you that," Pops replied, smiling. Later, when the crowd thinned, Pops poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to Randy. "Feels good, doesn't it?" he said. Randy took a sip, smiling into the steam. "Yeah, feels like I remember who I used to be, before everything went sideways." "You're still that man," Pops said. "Just got some dust to shake off." Randy stared at the floor, thinking. "You really believe people can change?" "I've seen it," Pops said simply. "Seen drunks sober up, liars tell the truth, enemies shake hands, seen hearts mend that nobody thought could beat again." Randy's voice turned quiet, You really got faith in me, don't you? Pops looked at him with a soft smile. Enough for both of us. The room went silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. Randy didn't answer right away, but Pops could see the fight in his eyes, the kind a man wages against his own shame. That evening, when the soup kitchen closed, Randy helped carry boxes out to the storage shed. As they finished, the last bit of daylight glowed gold across the horizon. Pops leaned against the doorframe, watching the sun slip away. You mail that letter yet? Pops asked. Randy nodded. Dropped it off this morning. And how do you feel? He exhaled slowly. Scared, but lighter. That's how freedom starts, Pops said. Feels strange at first, but it fits you better the longer you wear it. Randy smiled faintly. You always talk like that? Only when someone's actually listening, Pops said, laughing. They parted ways at the curb. Randy's truck roared to life, but he lingered a moment before driving off. You ever think maybe you were supposed to find that wallet? He called over the rumble of the engine. Pops tilted his head. No such thing as accidents, son. Just divine appointments. Randy nodded and drove off, the sound of his engine fading into the evening quiet. As Pops walked home, he passed neighbors sitting on porches, kids chasing each other down the street. A few waved. Others looked at him curiously, whispering under their breath. He didn't mind. He'd seen enough to know some folks would rather gossip than grow. When he reached home, the porch light flickered on automatically, and the repaired step gave its usual solid sound beneath his boot. He sat for a while, watching the stars appear one by one. Across town, in a small trailer lit by one weak bulb, Randy sat at his kitchen table with grease on his hands and the faintest smile on his face. For the first time in years, he wasn't angry. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't numb. He felt something warm building inside him, something that had nothing to do with engines or revenge. Hope. He didn't know it yet, but that single day of service at the soup kitchen would ripple far wider than either of them could imagine. Because kindness had a way of spreading like sunlight. Quiet at first, then unstoppable. And in that small Alabama town, a few hearts that had been closed tight for years were starting, just barely, to open. 2 weeks passed, and the days rolled by soft and steady, like ripples on a calm pond. Pops could feel the season shifting, the mornings cooler, the evenings golden. He filled his time with the usual routines, mornings at the soup kitchen, afternoons sweeping his porch, and evenings on the rocker, thinking about the strange friendship that had grown out of a lost wallet. Randy came by almost every other day. Sometimes he brought donuts, sometimes tools, and sometimes nothing at all. Just stories and quiet company. The town still talked, but the whispers had lost their bite. Even Miss Lila had begun to wave from her porch when Randy's truck passed. One morning, Pops was stirring oatmeal when his phone rang. It was Randy, his voice brighter than usual. Hey, old man, you busy this morning? Not yet, Pops said, smiling. What you got in mind? Thought we'd take a drive, got something to mail. Already mailed your letter? Not this one, Randy said. This one's a thank you. When Pops stepped outside, the air was sweet with honeysuckle. Randy's truck was idling by the curb, paint faded but engine humming smooth. Pops climbed in, and they drove in easy silence toward town. At the post office, Randy handed the clerk a small envelope. He didn't say what was inside, but Pops noticed the return address was simply R. Matheson, Sunny Acres Trailer Park. Afterward, they stopped by a roadside barbecue stand. The smell of hickory and sauce filled the air, and Pops's stomach growled. They sat on a picnic bench under a tin roof, while the cook handed over a plate piled high with ribs and slaw. "You know," Pops said, licking his fingers, "you're not half bad at this whole livin' thing." Randy laughed. "Guess I had a good teacher. Just don't forget your lessons when life starts throwing curveballs again." Randy's smile faded a bit. "You think that'll happen?" Pops looked out at the highway. "It always does. But now you got someone to call when it does." That night, Pops returned home feeling content. He sat on his porch with a slice of leftover pie and watched the streetlights flicker on. Across town, Randy was doing something he hadn't done in years, sleeping without a bottle beside his bed. The next afternoon at the soup kitchen, Pops was mopping the floor when the front door opened quietly. He didn't look up at first. Just another visitor, he thought. But then a soft female voice spoke. "Excuse me. I'm looking for Randy Matheson." Pops froze. He turned, mop still in hand. The young woman standing there was around 30, with the same brown eyes from that faded photograph. She clutched a folded letter, edges worn from rereading. "You must be Maggie," Pops said, his voice full of wonder. Her eyes widened. "You know my name?" He smiled kindly. "Your daddy's been waiting on you." Her breath caught. "He sent the letter. I almost didn't come. But something in his words. It sounded different this time." Pops nodded slowly. "He's different. You'll see." Randy was in the back, fixing a loose shelf. Pops called out, "Randy, you got a visitor." When Randy turned and saw her, the wrench fell from his hand. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Maggie whispered, "Hi, Dad." Randy's eyes filled, his rough voice breaking. "Maggie, that really you?" She nodded, tears spilling over. "You wrote to me, said you were done running." "I meant every word," he said, stepping closer but stopping halfway. "Didn't think you'd come." "I almost didn't," she admitted, "but I had to see if it was true." For a moment, the years melted away. The anger, the silence, the lost birthdays and missed chances. Randy opened his arms, and she walked into them. The hug was awkward, trembling, and full of everything words couldn't fix. Pops turned away, pretending to wipe the counter but blinking back tears. Miss Lila, standing in the doorway, pressed a hand to her chest and whispered, "Lord, you do have a flair for timing." When they finally sat down, Maggie told stories about her job as a nurse in Mobile, about her son, about life. Randy listened as if afraid she'd vanish if he blinked. Pops brewed coffee, letting them have their space. Later, when Maggie stood to leave, she hugged Pops, too. "Thank you," she said softly. "You helped my father believe he could be someone better." Pops smiled. He just needed a reminder that God wasn't done with him yet. After she left, Randy sank into a chair, hands trembling. "I can't believe she came." "Believe it," Pops said. "Grace likes surprises." That evening, the two men sat on Pop's porch, watching the first fireflies blink in the dusk. "She's coming back tomorrow," Randy said, still dazed. "Said she wants to meet you proper." "I'll be here," Pops said, grinning. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Silence settled between them, the kind that felt full instead of empty. Randy looked at his hands. "Pops, I ain't sure how to thank you." "You already did," Pops said. "By livin'." Randy let out a shaky laugh. "Guess I owe you ribs for life, then." "I'll take that deal," Pops said. The moon climbed high over the quiet town. In that gentle glow, two broken lives that had once wandered in darkness sat side by side, wrapped in the peace that only forgiveness could bring. And somewhere deep inside Randy, a man who had spent years running finally stopped. The next morning dawned bright and clear, with sunlight spilling through Pops's curtains. He rose early, as usual, making a fresh pot of coffee and frying 2 eggs in his cast-iron skillet. He hummed an old hymn while he cooked, the sound mingling with the chirping of sparrows outside. Today, his heart felt lighter. He had a feeling the Lord was doing something bigger than either he or Randy could yet see. By cool mid-morning, Pop sat on the porch sipping his coffee when Randy's truck pulled up. Maggie was beside him, her hair tied back, her face glowing but nervous. Pops waved. "Morning, y'all. Coffee's fresh and hot?" Maggie smiled shyly. "Good morning, sir." "None of that sir business," Pops said warmly. "You call me Pops like everyone else." Inside, the smell of coffee and biscuits filled the little kitchen. Pops poured them each a mug, and they sat around the table. Maggie talked about her work as a nurse in Mobile, how hard it was raising her little boy on her own. Randy listened like a man hearing music after years of silence. "I missed so much," he said softly. "Didn't even know I had a grandson till last week." "You can still make up for lost time," Maggie said. "He's only 8. Still loves toy trucks and pancakes." Pops chuckled. "Well now, pancakes I can help with." Laughter filled the room, warm and easy. It was a sound that hadn't graced Randy's life in years. By afternoon, word had spread again, this time faster than before. Folks driving by Pops's house slowed down to look. Some waved politely, others frowned. By evening, the church ladies group had already begun whispering. Miss Lila came by after supper with a pie, her eyes darting. "James, I'm real glad your friend's daughter came, truly am, but people are talking again." Pops set the pie on the counter. "Let 'em talk. They'll get tired of it eventually." She sighed. "You always say that, but this time they mean it. Some folks don't like seeing that man walking around free. They say he's bringing his old gang back." "He's bringing hope back," Pops said firmly. "That's what he's bringing." Lila frowned, then nodded slowly. "I hope you're right." Later that evening, Randy and Maggie invited Pops to dinner at the trailer park. Pops hesitated at first. He'd never been past the front gate, but he couldn't say no. When he arrived, Maggie was setting the table while Randy grilled chicken outside. The smell of charcoal and sauce filled the air. Pops looked around the small trailer yard. Rusty cars, old tires, wildflowers growing between cracks in the dirt. It wasn't much, but it looked alive again. They ate under the open sky, laughing and trading stories. For a while, everything felt normal, peaceful. But peace, Pops knew, was fragile. Halfway through the meal, the low rumble of engines rolled in from the road. 2 motorcycles slowed near the trailer park entrance. Black leather, chrome gleaming in the sunset. Pops saw Randy stiffen. Maggie froze mid-bite. The bikes stopped near the gate, and 2 men climbed off. One was tall, snake tattoo curling up his neck. The other heavyset with mirrored sunglasses. They didn't approach, just stood watching. Randy's jaw clenched. "It's them again," he muttered. "Viper and chains. Used to ride with me." Pops set, down his fork. "They looking for trouble?" "Always," Randy said. "They don't like that I left. They think I made the club look weak." Maggie's voice trembled. "Dad, maybe we should call the police." "No," Randy said quickly. "That'll just make 'em worse." Pops's calm voice cut through the tension. "Fear gives them power. You already took that back. Don't hand it over again." Randy looked at him, then exhaled. "You're right." He turned to Maggie. "Stay inside. I'll talk to him." He walked out toward the road. Pops stood at the porch rail, ready if needed, but trusting the moment to unfold. The bikers laughed as Randy approached. Pops could only catch fragments of the talk, taunts, old insults, the sound of Viper spitting on the ground. Finally, Randy's voice rose, clear and steady. I'm done, you hear me? I ain't part of that life no more. You want to fight? Fine. But I ain't giving you what you came for. Viper sneered. You're soft now, brother. That preacher got you tame. Randy stepped closer, eyes burning. Maybe he did, but I sleep better at night. There was silence. Then Viper laughed, a hard, mean sound, and swung his leg over his bike. We'll see how long that lasts. The engines roared, and they sped off, kicking up dust. When Randy came back to the porch, Pops handed him a cup of water. His hands were shaking. You did right, son. Takes more strength to walk away than to swing a fist. Randy nodded slowly. Didn't think it'd feel this hard? It's supposed to, Pops said gently. That's how you know you're changing. Inside, Maggie hugged her father tight. I'm proud of you, Dad. Randy swallowed hard, blinking back tears. First time anyone said that in a long time. That night, after Pops went home, the town buzzed again. Some said Randy was stirring up old trouble. Others said maybe, just maybe, that old trouble was learning to be good. In his small house, Pops sat by the window, looking up at the stars. He whispered, Lord, you're moving pieces I can't see. Just don't let fear win. Outside, the night was quiet again, but the wind carried a faint echo of motorcycles far in the distance, rumbling like a storm waiting its turn. The air felt different that night, thick, heavy, like the sky was holding its breath. Pops sat on his porch after dinner, watching lightning flicker far off on the horizon. The crickets were restless, chirping louder than usual. Something in his chest told him trouble was brewing, and it wasn't just the weather. By the time he went inside, the wind had picked up. The curtains fluttered, and the first drops of rain began to fall against the windows. Pops checked the clock. 8:47. Randy was supposed to stop by tomorrow morning to help fix the old fence, but something tugged at Pops's spirit, whispering that the young man needed him tonight. He reached for his Bible, intending to pray, when the sound came, a distant roar of engines cutting through the storm. He froze. The sound grew louder. Then, faintly, a crash echoed from the direction of Sunny Acres Trailer Park. Lord have mercy, Pops breathed, grabbing his coat and cane. Rain poured as he hurried down the street. The night flashed white with lightning. By the time he reached the edge of the trailer park, the ground was slick with mud, and the wind carried voices, angry, shouting, mean. He followed the noise to Lot 9. Randy's trailer door hung open, light spilling out into the rain. 2 men in leather jackets stood in the yard, Viper and Chains. Between them, Randy stood soaked and bleeding from a cut on his forehead, his fists clenched. You don't tell us what to do, Viper shouted. You think you're better than us now? Randy's voice was hoarse but steady. I told you, I'm done. You want to fight, fine, but I ain't riding with you ever again. Chains shoved him hard, sending him stumbling into the mud. Enough, Pops's voice cut through the rain like thunder. All 3 men turned. The sight of the frail old man with his cane didn't scare them, but the calm in his voice did. Pops stepped forward, rain soaking his hat. You boys ought to be ashamed, he said firmly. 2 grown men beating on someone who's trying to make things right. That's not strength, it's cowardice. Viper sneered. Old man, you'd best walk away before you get hurt. Pops didn't flinch. Son, I've lived through worse men than you. If you're gonna swing, you'd better mean it. For a heartbeat, the world went still. Rain falling in sheets, thunder cracking in the distance. Then Viper lunged forward. Before Pops could move, Randy stepped between them, taking the hit across the jaw. He stumbled, then retaliated, tackling Viper into the mud. Chains grabbed a metal chain from his belt, swinging it wildly. It struck Randy across the shoulder, sending him to his knees. Stop! Pops shouted, moving forward. "This ain't the way!" But the bikers weren't listening. They kicked Randy once more before the sound of sirens pierced the night. Someone must have called the police. The bikers cursed, jumped on their motorcycles, and roared off into the darkness. Pops rushed to Randy's side, kneeling in the mud. Blood trickled down the man's cheek, mixing with the rain. "Easy, son," Pops said, voice shaking. "Help's coming." Randy coughed, wincing. "They were gonna burn the trailer. I stopped them." "You did right," Pops said. "You did right." Within minutes, flashing lights filled the street. Paramedics ran over, lifting Randy onto a stretcher. Pops climbed into the ambulance beside him, gripping his hand all the way to the hospital. As the siren wailed, Randy's eyelids fluttered. "Pops, I'm here. Don't let Maggie blame herself." "She won't," Pops promised, squeezing his hand. "You rest now. God's got you." At the hospital, doctors moved quickly. Pops sat in the waiting room, rain dripping from his coat, his heart pounding slow and heavy. Maggie arrived 15 minutes later, hair soaked, eyes wide with panic. "What happened?" she cried. Pops stood and took her hand gently. "Some men from his past came looking for trouble. He stood his ground. He's hurt, but he's alive." She buried her face in her hands. "Why won't the past leave him alone?" "Because the devil hates losing what he thought he owned," Pops said softly. Hours passed before the doctor came out. "He's stable," the man said. "Banged up pretty bad, but he'll pull through." Maggie sobbed with relief. Pops bowed his head, whispering, "Thank you, Lord." When they were finally allowed in, Randy was pale but breathing steady. His arm was bandaged, his lip swollen, and one eye bruised. Pops sat beside him, holding his hand while Maggie stroked his hair. "You're safe now," she whispered. Randy opened his eyes weakly. "Didn't think they'd really come back." Pops nodded. "Evil don't like losing, but you didn't run, and that's what matters." Randy smiled faintly. "Guess I had to prove you were right about me." "Didn't need proof," Pops said. "I knew it all along." The room was quiet, except for the soft beep of machines. Outside, the storm began to fade, the rain turning gentle. Pops looked out the window at the first hint of dawn breaking through the clouds. "You rest now," he said. "Tomorrow's coming, and it's got peace written all over it." But deep down, he knew the storm had left more than broken glass and bruises behind. It had left questions, too. Questions about faith, forgiveness, and whether a man could truly outpace the sins that chased him. For now, though, Pops let it rest. He bowed his head, whispered a prayer, and sat beside his friend till the first sunlight touched the window pane. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and coffee gone cold. Pops sat in a stiff plastic chair by Randy's bedside, hands folded around his worn Bible. Machines hummed softly, steady but fragile, like the rhythm of a heart trying to remember peace. Rain tapped against the window, gentle now, though thunder still grumbled far away. Maggie had cried herself to sleep in the corner, her head resting on her father's coat. Pops watched her breathing slow, thinking of his own Mary, how she used to fall asleep the same way when their son was in the hospital years ago. He'd promised God then that if he ever saw someone else in that kind of pain, he'd stay beside them, no matter how hard it got. Now here he was, older, slower, but still keeping that promise. He opened his Bible, not to read, just to hold it. The pages smelled like old paper and hope. "Lord," he whispered, "I'm tired, but I ain't quittin'. Not while this boy's still fightin'." Down the hall he could hear nurses' soft shoes against the floor. The night shift was quiet, full of sighs and distant beeps. Randy stirred, eyelids fluttering open. His voice was weak. "You still here?" "Where else would I be?" Pops said with a small smile. Randy tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "I almost lost it again. When they came, I saw red. Thought I'd gone back to who I was." Pops leaned forward. "You didn't. You stood your ground. You protected your family. That's what real men do." Randy's eyes glistened. "You think God can still use a man like me?" Pops reached over, resting his old hand over Randy's rough one. "Son, God uses broken tools to fix the world. Sometimes the cracks let the light through." Randy swallowed hard, tears slipping down his cheek. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Pops squeezed his hand. "Wouldn't dare." Outside, the storm clouds began to break apart, and a thin strip of dawn spread across the horizon, soft, pink, and full of promise. And for the first time in a long while, Pops felt his faith tremble not from fear, but from gratitude. The morning light streamed through the hospital blinds, warm and gentle after a long night of storms. Pops sat dozing in his chair, his hat tilted forward. When he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was Randy. Awake, sitting upright, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his bruised mouth. "You look half alive again," Pops said, stretching his back. Randy gave a hoarse laugh. "Feels strange, waking up in a place where people care if you make it." Maggie stood by the bed with 2 cups of coffee. "Doctor says you'll walk out of here in a few days," she said. "Guess the world isn't done with you yet." Randy took a sip, wincing at the heat. "Didn't think I'd earn another sunrise?" Pops smiled. "You didn't earn it. You were given it. Mercy's a gift, not a paycheck." Later that afternoon, the small-town newspaper reporter came by, a young woman with kind eyes. She'd heard about the fight and wanted the truth. Randy tried to refuse, but Pops nudged him. "Maybe folks need to hear something good for a change." Randy told his story plain and simple, about the wallet, about the kindness that turned him around, about second chances. The next morning, the article hit front pages across town. "A wallet, a prayer, and a second chance. How an old man's kindness changed everything." At first, Pops thought nothing of it, but by noon, people began stopping by the soup kitchen, neighbors bringing casseroles, strangers donating money for repairs. Even Sheriff Whitaker dropped by, tipping his hat. "Heard you've been busy spreading mercy, Mr. Carter." Pops chuckled. "Mercy don't spread by accident, Sheriff. You just gotta let it loose." That evening, Pops visited Randy again. The room was full of flowers and cards. "Get well. Soon." "Thank you." And one that simply read, "You've given me hope." Randy stared at the gifts, shaking his head. "All this because I got my wallet back?" Pops laughed softly. "No, son, because you gave your life back." Outside, the sunset spilled gold across the windows, and for the first time, both men believed it. Mercy was in motion, and it wasn't stopping anytime soon. The hospital released Randy on a sunny Thursday morning. Pops was waiting out front with his old truck, the one that rattled more than it rolled. "Ain't fancy," Pops said, opening the passenger door, "but it gets there eventually." Randy grinned, climbing in carefully. His arm was still bandaged, but his spirit seemed lighter. "After where I've been, this feels like a limousine." They drove in easy silence. The town rolled by. Small shops, church steeples, kids on bikes. Folks waved from porches, some shyly, some bold. Word had spread about Randy's stand against his old gang. For once, people weren't looking at him with fear, but with respect. Pops parked near the old abandoned service station by the edge of town. The windows were cracked, the roof half gone. "What you see here," Pops said, "is potential." Randy raised an eyebrow. I see rust. Rust can be scrubbed. Broken things can be rebuilt. Thought maybe this could be your start. Randy stepped out, staring at the space. He walked the cracked concrete, tracing the ghost of the old sign. You serious? As a prayer, Pops said. You fix engines better than anyone I've seen. Why not fix lives while you're at it? Charge folks fair, help the ones who can't pay. Randy was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, that rare, boyish smile that made him look younger. All right, but I'm naming it after you, Pop's Garage. Pops laughed. Lord, you don't need to flatter me to work hard. Weeks passed. The town came together. Miss Lila brought pies, Sheriff Whitaker donated paint, and volunteers cleared the lot. Randy worked dawn to dusk, hammering, welding, and whistling like a man reborn. When the Pop's Garage, where Second Chances Start sign finally went up, the whole town gathered to clap and cheer. Pops looked at Randy, eyes full of pride. Told you broken things can run again? Randy wiped his hands on a rag, smiling. Guess that goes for people too. As twilight fell, the shop lights glowed bright against the darkening sky, a beacon for anyone who'd ever lost their way. The sky turned to honey and rose as evening fell over Pops's garage. The shop glowed warm against the fading light, its new white paint catching the colors of sunset. The sign above the door, Pop's Garage, where Second Chances Start, shone softly, a promise written in wood and hope. The air smelled of oil, sawdust, and magnolia blossoms drifting in from the yard. Inside, Randy tightened the last bolt on an old pickup truck. Behind his sunk, daughter Maggie hummed along with a gospel song on the radio as she swept the floor. It was ordinary work, but to them it felt holy, proof that broken things could still be made whole. Pops sat outside on his rocking chair, hat tipped back, sipping coffee and watching the world slow down. He had never felt more at peace. Randy stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag. You sure you don't get tired of sitting there watching me work? Pops smiled. Son, after all these years, it's nice to finally see someone do the fixin' instead of the breakin'. They laughed together, the sound easy and real. The town had changed. Where once folks whispered, now they waved. People stopped by daily just to talk, sometimes to ask for help, sometimes just to listen. The shop had become a safe place for hearts as much as engines. Maggie came out carrying 3 mugs of coffee. Y'all better drink this before it gets cold, she said, handing one to each of them. Her face glowed in the soft amber light. Ethan's excited about visiting this weekend, Dad. He's been telling his teacher all about his grandpa's garage. Randy's eyes filled with quiet awe. My grandson wants to meet me, he whispered. Pops chuckled. God don't waste good stories, son. He just waits for the right chapter. They sat together on the porch, silence stretching comfortable and full. Fireflies blinked in the grass. The crickets sang their steady hymn. Randy looked over at Pops. You ever miss her? Every day, Pops said softly, but tonight I think she's sitting right here with us. As the last of the light faded, Pops leaned back, eyes lifted to the glowing horizon. See, Mary? He whispered. He came home too. And when the stars began to shine, the garage light stayed on, steady, bright, and open. A reminder that mercy, once it finds a home, never closes its doors again. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.